So in this blog, I'm discussing something that I call chaperone culture, and but I just want to give a quick background on the word chaperone. I know it's generally used to refer to like an adult who I guess goes on like a field trip or something to accompany minors, but in the historical sense of the word, it can also mean basically anyone who accompanies an unmarried woman in public spaces with the I guess the goal of safety. So moving forward, I recently attended a holiday event in my apartment complex, and it was cool and all, but I noticed something that I've noticed for been noticing for a while now, which is that attractive women only go places with a chaperone, i.e., a bodyguard per se. This is usually a male or a masculine female friend. Further, if the occurrences were random, I guess it wouldn't be a concern. I wouldn't care so much. But I guess for me, it's when the probability that a woman will leave home solo or guarded correlates directly to their attractiveness. One can't help but be cynical about uh, the sexual marketplace. Moreover, chaperone culture highlights how commodified the sexual marketplace has become. Uh, for example, so there were women, young and old, mostly of average looks at the holiday gala, and with the exception of the group of old women who were at a table together and the ones who brought their kids, most of the females were solo. But I noticed it was like every attractive chick that came through strategically was accompanied by a guy. Um, I guess you could say there was one girl who came with a female friend, so I guess that would be the exception, I guess. Um, However, her friend was larger in build and a lot less hot. So, in other words, I mean, I guess that could be counted as an exception, but I would say her friend was kind of basically just a guy substitute, a substitute for a male chaperone. So, I don't really think that conflicts with my theory, so to speak. Further, I initially thought chaperone culture was a southern thing, but now I believe it's more of a class or even a race thing. To specify, I definitely observed this behavior after years of living in Atlanta. That's definitely something I noticed there. But more recently, I'm staying in Detroit, and I see it equally as much here. Also, I visited NYC and was surprised at how little chaperoning there was. In other words, women in Manhattan moved freely through public spaces and were rarely coupled, not to mention most were highly attractive. However, it goes without saying that NYC is more of a premium city than Detroit or even Atlanta per se, given its high cost of living and just given the demographics. Thus, I would now conclude chaperone culture seems to permeate less in environments where the men are likely to be wealthy or famous, i.e., they're of a higher class or even of a particular race, given that NYC is less black than the former two cities. And I should note here, just from a little cursory research, I don't know every, I mean, I don't know every detail about Islam, but I also understand that in certain Islamic cultures, a chaperone, amongst other things, I guess would be the norm. Um, that's if that were the case here, I wouldn't be concerned either because in that case, that's a uniform practice that is religion based. And I should also note the the assertion that I made earlier about like if things were random, I wouldn't be concerned. I don't think those two hypotheticals conflict. So in other words, I guess just to be clear and to make sure there's no contradictions in my I guess logic, I guess I would say the two scenarios where I would not be concerned that like wouldn't have me kind of raising my eyebrow or whatever would be a if the probability that a woman is out with or without a chaperone was random, then I guess I wouldn't be concerned. But that's not the case. That's not the current case either. Like, for example, there's a store I go to um, in Detroit, and I already know before I go in there, I already know if there's an attractive woman, it's highly likely she will have a chaperone, and if not, she probably won't. So that's case one isn't the reality, but case two, where we live under an Islamic regime and the chaperoning is uniformity, that's not the case either. So neither one of those is the case. I'm not a statistician, so maybe I'm not using all the right lingo, but I just want to say neither one of those is the case. And if they were, I probably wouldn't be concerned. But what we have here, what I'm experiencing, is this weird, almost genetic gatekeeping, or kind of, which is kind of dystopian. So that, uh, to me, is of concern, and it kind of leads to my next point, which is that chaperone culture, honestly, it kind of reminds me of um, the this like anti-theft loss prevention practices that can be seen in a lot of retail chains, basically. So on the surface, chaperone culture and the loss prevention practices that a lot of retail chains have been implementing, on the surface, they seem altruistic. The former is meant, in theory, to protect women. The latter is to protect the bottom line, commodities, aka commodities. But I guess for me, it's when they're implemented so discriminately is when things get offensive, basically. So, um, for example, I know there were stories in like their YouTube videos and news stories, kind of how how some of the Krogers in the Atlanta area were like partitioning off essential goods in some neighborhoods and not other neighborhoods, and it did map pretty consistently to like race. Like in some neighborhoods, goods were locked behind like a partition, and in other neighborhoods they aren't. And also, I've noticed they offer certain goods in some neighborhoods that they don't, like certain wines or whatever. And whether that's wrong or right, that I guess is another debate. But the bottom line is, some people do find that offensive. So I guess in a nutshell, I was just saying that if realizing that Kroger, for example, locks down goods in one neighborhood and not another makes you uncomfortable, then in the same vein, algorithmic guarding of women per their attractiveness or per the collective worth of the men in their environment should too. With that said, thanks for listening. And also, if you want a more formal look into some of these assertions, then check out Pissyblog, pissyblog.com. Thanks for watching.